to say thank you to everybody for being here. I want to say thanks to the City of Jasper to arrange the location. I know that we agreed that we wanted to have an off-site neutral location for us to meet, and Jasper made all the arrangements to get this put together. So thank you guys very much. Thanks to Chat Tech for setting the room up and doing a great job. We did meet a few weeks ago, or at least 3 of us met a few weeks ago. Nelson, Jasper, and Pickens County had sat down. We had originally sent a letter to Talking Rock on eligibility to be here. They responded and provided their eligibility to participate. So Mr. Bryant with Talking Rock is here as well. I know that he's kind of coming in late. We spoke for just a few minutes on the phone last week. So as far as preparation, some of us may have more material together for today than others, but today is the first of a series of 3 negotiation meetings that we'll go through. I think that we all kind of agree we'd each make our presentations today and get the information out there, and then sit down next week to begin kind of breaking that down. As a joke, when we were getting ready to start, I grabbed a deck of cards to bring in this morning and decided we could just have one big game. Winner take all, that we would deal those out. But the reality was just to have some cards so that we could draw numbers for the order in which it goes first, so that nobody really gets an unfair advantage of some people believe first is best, some people believe last is best, as to how they go. Chat Tech has set up a computer here. If you have a presentation, it didn't time out completely. And just bring up your presentation, you plug it in, and there's a presenter here. So when each group comes up, we'll go through and do that. Hopefully we'll all be able to just kind of go back and forth. Somebody that's impartial, I'm trying to find somebody, we may have to get the media up here. I don't know if everybody's either city or county looking in the back of the room. If we can get somebody that everybody's comfortable with, just to draw a card. I don't want to be the one that's necessarily carrying them around. Miss Christy Poole, would you possibly come up and be the one to do that? That way you can shuffle them up, and we'll have one from each representative. Just draw a card. They're 2 through 5. I left the ace out. That way we couldn't all say the ace trumped anything else. And then you can shuffle them and work your way around. Whatever we got left over. All right, so we're 4-2. And I guess we'll use the mic just because we do have no Pickens that's filming. If we need to carry the mic and move it around, that way we make sure everybody can hear. But whoever got number 2, we'll go ahead and just start, and then whoever's 3 right after that, we'll go and follow behind. But of course it would be James who learned about this at the last minute, so.
Yeah, I apologize. Good morning, everybody. My name is James Bryant. For those that never met me, I've recently taken over as the Mayor Pro Temp for the town of Talking Rock. I started in January. I've been on the town council for going on 5 years. I got reelected for post number 4 as a council member last November, but taking over full responsibilities. We have a whole brand new council member staff, so we're learning in progress. Our town clerk has helped us a lot. We had 0 transition, so please forgive me. There's a lot of things that I don't know that I'm trying to learn, but I do appreciate the possibility to come here and join these meetings. And I do appreciate the county and fellow cities and towns that's been able to help us with this. So I'm looking forward to learning as much as I can. I promise you I'll be more prepared. But if you have any questions for me, please let me know, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sylvia Green with Nelson. Again, this is my first meeting with Lost as well. We're doing our homework. The city is, I know we had an issue with our census being down this year. We filed a complaint with that. I believe Kelsey did that on our behalf. A lot of our citizens did not get censuses, so we definitely have not gone down. We've built new houses, and the houses that we have been converted. With that said, we have a great council. We have a lot of projects coming up this year. Looking forward to these negotiations and seeing where we land. Thank you.
So on behalf of the county, we went through and tried to explain a little bit in the slides the process and then kind of the county's position in the way the process should go forward. And so put together a presentation to go through some of that material. The first is just going through lost in Georgia counties that do impose one. The local option sales tax is a 1% sales and use tax. That one's kind of an obvious. As far as the process in Pickens, kind of looking through how that goes, generally these are all laid out in the official code of Georgia, section 48.880 all the way through 97. They're required to be renegotiated within 2 years of the census. Each time the census is drawn, these are requirements that counties and cities go through. It's a permanent tax that is, unless a referendum is passed to repeal it, it is a permanent tax. Unless a referendum is there or if a certificate is not provided to the Department of Revenue within the time period that's allotted. That for this year would be December the 30th of 2022. So I think for each of us in the room, this is our first run at this because we've all been elected since the last 10-year portion of when that was going on. The process is to produce an outcome before December the 30th, and that process includes this meeting, obviously, at least 2 additional meetings in order to go through what needs to be gone through. And then if necessary, a dispute resolution process. I know with Talking Rock not being at the meeting where we had kind of discussed the process, we did kind of already go ahead and agree in advance that if for some reason we don't all come to a consensus, that we would go to the mediation process when it reached that point. So we'll hopefully not have to cross that, but we did kind of establish that before we get there so that wouldn't be an issue. The Board of Commissioners plans to continue to work on gathering feedback from our constituents, continual analysis of everything that's there, and then obtaining feedback from peer counties as well, to work through and getting that feedback from peer counties. And our objective is fairly simple from the Board of Commissioners' perspective, is we're here to seek the comprehensive solution that best meets the needs of 34,322 residents of Pickens County's unincorporated and incorporated areas. The Board of Commissioners' objective is to try to come up with what is that comprehensive look. That number may look different than the 2020 census number. I know that they both are slightly different. That number came from the 2022 projected populations. We can obviously go back and forth and use numbers from both, but just to explain that 34,000 is how that is. What we mean when we say comprehensive is taking a look at service delivery is one of the first objectives that we would go through, and then the loss continuation and distribution process that we're going through as well. Under comprehensive, when you look at service delivery, in 2018 was the latest service delivery strategy that's been filed between the counties and any municipality in the state. We've looked through those, we've tried to look at those filings and what all is there. In addition, you have the loss continuation and distribution certificate that was filed back in 2011, was the latest time that this was filed amongst the county and the cities. We've all spoke at one point or another that this is the first time that we're in the process. We weren't here during those meetings and when those things took place. I will say from reviewing certain things and certain items that are missing, we would have, as a county, had a difficult time with the filing of both of those documents in the way that they were presented. So we want to make sure that we're trying to address all of those things as we go through this process. It's really an integrated 2-part reset in the best interest of the totality of all 34,322 residents from the county's perspective. We want to make sure that whatever the reset is, this is in the best interest of all residents of the county, both incorporated in each of your municipalities and unincorporated as well. If you take a look at the sales and taxes in Georgia, you can look at specifically the way that the state rates are set. And this is a building slide, so my slides I'm looking at show them all built. That's why I keep glancing back at the computer screen to make sure where we're going. The breakdown for counties, there's 4%, as we know from the government side, but for the public that's here. 4% is a state tax rate of any sales tax, plus local rates up to 5%, totaling anything up to 9%. So if you look in the state of Georgia, you'll see out of 159 counties, there's 1 county that's at 9%. There's 8 counties that are sitting, there's 99 counties that are at 8%. And then there's 54 counties that are at 7% and 5 counties that are at 6%. Pickens falls in that category of the 7% rate, which is broke down, like we said before, 4% is the state, 1% is the SPLOST tax that was passed by referendum, 1% is an EWOS tax that was passed by referendum, and then 1% is lost, which is what we're here to go through today. As we go through a drill down into the lost, and you look at those counties that we were looking at, there are 10 counties that do not impose a general purpose lost. There's 10 throughout the state. And you can see with these population numbers that pop up, they range from all over the place. They range from as small as 17,000 all the way up to 273,000. So there's no real criteria that breaks down why or when, how that necessarily has taken place. But there are 10 counties that have agreed not to impose a loss in their communities. I'm going to go through the law portion of it. Is I've got the information and the facts that kind of go through. I'm not going to read through every single portion of it, but I do think that the initial is to look at the intent of what loss was intended to do. The General Assembly said it is the intent of the General Assembly that no agreement as to the distribution of the proceeds of the tax shall enrich any political subdivision beyond a sum which in the absence of the distribution would be raised through other sources of revenue. In simple terms, loss is not intended to expand or enrich any local government. It's expanded, it did exist in order to offset other taxes that were there. In the law, they also state that there's 8 criteria that must be considered in loss negotiations. In those, it's not an exclusive list. It's not weighted or prioritized. No guidance for measuring what level should be provided from each portion of it. Most measurements of the criteria do not allow for mutually exclusive data. So, I mean, if we provide one set of data and then municipalities provide another, it does not allow. It does not give us a formula. It simply states that we have to consider them. We have to consider them all, but we don't have to use them all, according to the way that the law is written. And there's a tremendous overlap between the criteria that's broke down in there. If you look at some of the key points, whenever you're going through what is found in those 8 criteria, service delivery is referenced in 6 of the 8 criteria. It's brought up in 6 different ones. Point of sale is referenced in only 1 of the 8 criteria when you go through those. Under the service delivery, it's mentioned specifically by name in 4 of the criteria that the state says that we're supposed to follow. It's mentioned indirectly in 2 of the criteria. And then point of sale is included in the broader context of the point of sale and use in that breakdown. The 8 criteria, they're all present. Each of you have had an opportunity, I'm sure, to go through the law, so I'm not going to try to bore you to death by going through and reading every single criteria. We do have them in the slides, but I'm just going to kind of advance through those if y'all are comfortable with that. Once again, they're building on top of each other. So if you look under that 8 criteria, you can see highlighted where we were speaking just a moment ago, where it does reference service delivery by name those 4 different times. And then also you can see where point of sale and use is referenced as well. All right, so failure to reach an agreement. I think that's one thing we've all got to keep in the back of our minds. What happens if we fail to reach an agreement? As we go through this process, that's one of the big important things. Lost is, like we said before, it's a permanent tax unless a referendum is passed to repeal or failure to file a new distribution certificate with the Department of Revenue every 10 years. If you look back at our map that we were looking at before, if we failed to come to an agreement, essentially what would happen is, instead of having 54 counties with a 7-cent sales tax, we'd have 53 counties with a 7-cent sales tax. Instead of having your 5 total counties that have a 6% sales tax, it would go to 6 counties with a 6% sales tax. That would put Pickens in that category. On the broader scope of things, what that says is sales tax would go down. But in an effort for that sales tax to go down, property taxes would go up. And it would go up equal in terms of the amount of the rollback on property taxes that were there. So you're looking at an equal percentage that would change, or an equal dollar amount that would change from the loss of that sales tax revenue, which obviously shifts the burden from all residents and visitors of Pickens County to the property taxpayers. So obviously, as you look through that, failure to reach an agreement is something that we definitely want to try to avoid. I think that that's one of the key points that we've got to keep in mind as we go through this process over the next few weeks, is that shifts that burden to the property taxpayer. From the Board of Commissioners standpoint, we're going to continue to work gathering feedback from constituents. We're going to continue the analysis of all the data from all sources and then obtaining the feedback from our peer counties. Some of our decision drivers that we're using as we're going through this process, and I've got to thank some of our staff members that are here that have been working really diligently to go through and gather the data. I've got Director Sloan Elrod, that's Director of Public Safety, Director Bill Wood, who's the Director over Administrative Operations, have both been working to try to make sure that we have facts. Especially when you go into a negotiation process, it's easy to get based off emotion instead of facts. So I think that the more data driven we are, the better that we can go through the process. I think that when you look at the inclusive constituency, a zero-sum revenue outcome, service delivery and lost, the nature and role of sales tax use, and low-density growth commitment from the county is our 5 decision factors that we're working through as we're trying to get through this process. You can see that they're all interconnected. There's not one that stands alone. They all work amongst themselves. Under the service delivery, slides aren't matching up for what I've got in front of me. Sorry about that. So under our inclusive constituency is producing the best outcome for all 34,322 residents. Not just for a portion, but for all residents that we're going through, that we're wanting to ensure that we're looking out for. From the zero-sum revenue is a commitment to fully roll back the property taxes of all owners from lost proceeds. If you look at what the county's perspective is, our county commits to otherwise not offsetting this rollback with additional millage rate increases, but trying to make sure that we honor the purpose of why lost exists, to take away the tax burden from property owners. Service delivery related items, whenever you go through referenced in 6 of the 8 loss distribution criteria set forth, I believe this is in contrast again to the one time where point of sale is there. Looking at what services are being provided by which group, I think is extremely important as we come down to how we get to an end result. And then the nature and role of sales tax use. Customers, not businesses, pay these taxes. These are from the customers that shop. Businesses simply collect, deposit, and report it. It's the customers from all over that go in and provide those purchases that make those businesses thrive. Under the 5th item of low density growth, the Board of Commissioners believes that the constituents, the majority of its constituents, embrace a low density growth value. It's been evidenced in recent elections that have gone through that was one of the determining factors and kind of the single driver. We understand that we cannot, nor would we, if we had the opportunity to, try to impose that on any municipality. That is our goal. That is our unincorporated Pickens County goal. It's not something that's directed toward anything. But we also recognize that we have an obligation to help make efforts to minimize the amount of county funds that are paid from county constituents to unduly support high-density growth. They've made that very vocal to myself and each other candidate that has participated in all the other commissioners. So we do believe it is a factor that needs to be considered while we're going through the process, as to ensuring that we are all trying to follow that process. So kind of restating what we said at the beginning, we're here to seek a comprehensive solution that meets the needs of all residents, incorporated and unincorporated. And we want to follow that through an integrated 2-part sorry. I always like when the computer's sitting in front of me, so we want to follow that through continuing to gather that feedback from constituents, through continuing to analyze everything, continuing to reach out to peer counties and make sure that we're gathering the information from the peer counties. And we're here to seek that comprehensive solution so that we make sure that we're meeting the needs of Pickens County's incorporated and unincorporated through this integrated 2-part reset, where we take a look both at our service delivery and at anything to do with our loss distribution certificate. So as far as from the county, that's our approach that we're planning to follow through as we go through the negotiation process, just to kind of lay that all on the table. And we thank you guys very much for being here and giving us a chance to be here. Thank you.
So good morning. Our goal is very similar to what the county has said, and I also want to say that we've been working together really well with the county, that each of us values what each can bring to the table, and this loss process will bring that out also, because all we're going to determine at some point is the value that everyone holds as far as the money that can be spent inside the city for loss or inside the county for loss. So they're totally correct. It is a zero sum. So for this morning, I want to introduce those of us who are a team from the City of Jasper, and that is Sonia Janis, our city manager, David Siphon, our city attorney, Sonny Proctor, our city council, and I also want to introduce to you today Mr. Phil Sutton, who is going to present for the City of Jasper our side of the equation as to what we feel like our worth is. So at this time, Mr. Sutton, if you come forward, please.
Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be with you in Jasper and Pickens County. A consultant often feels like they just have no connection to a community, but I do have a connection to your community. My wife's father's side of the family were all from Pickens County. They're Marble Hill, Tate, Talking Rock, that area. Her great-grandfather was the minister of the Long Swamp Baptist Church for many, many years, I guess, for his career. B.B. Richards was his name. Enough about me. I'd like to talk about the local option sales tax, and we have a proposal to put on the table for the cities and other cities and the county to consider. These just, I think that the county commission chair did a great job of laying out an overview. I won't try to, I'll try not to be redundant there, but this is a renegotiation that occurs only once every 10 years, so we need to refresh ourselves. So that was a great refresher, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things about the law that I want to emphasize. Population is not the sole criteria. Governments are not allowed to draw a direct correlation with population in loss. It's the one measure that loss specifically tells us that we're not to use that as the exclusive or most heavily weighted measurement. There are 8 criteria listed in the legislation, and we intend to go through and do our very best to measure those 8 criteria, any of the 8 criteria that are measurable. The challenge, of course, is how to quantify each jurisdiction's service delivery responsibilities in a simple percentage. And the law really doesn't guide us on how to do that. Another change this year from when we went through this 10 years ago was if we're not able to negotiate a final distribution during this first 60-day period, we then go to non-binding arbitration. 10 years ago, if you didn't settle a non-binding arbitration, you could go on to court and have a judge make a ruling in what they call term baseball arbitration. That's not an option anymore. So we either need to do it in these meetings or need to come to an agreement in that mediation. That's, of course, very important. The allocation of the service delivery is, as the chairman said, based on service delivery responsibilities. The law requires the distribution of loss be based on service delivery responsibilities and the funding requirements of the services funded by loss. So that means that we're talking about general fund. Those services that are funded by loss and property tax, because the property tax and loss are interchangeable. Your local option sales tax revenue goes up, property tax has to be rolled back by an equal amount. So what method of measurement is described in the law? There are none. But there are some sensitive issues that come up in the 8 criteria that we need to discuss. First one is central business district, which talks about the industrial development and the impact of the central business district. Point of sale and tax equity are specifically mentioned in the 8 criteria. Now, our methodology that the city has used is we took a very careful look at the law, all four corners of the law, if you will, as the lawyers like to say. We tried to do a quantitative analysis and match data that can be applied to cities and counties and help describe, take each one of these 8 criteria and put a percentage number to it, to those that it's possible to do that. And then we analyze all of that data into a comprehensive presentation, which we have here today. I'm going to cut to the chase. This is what the city is proposing as the distribution for the county and the 3 cities. And I'll go through this quickly, just to give you sort of the big picture overview, and then we'll take it apart and go through the 8 criteria in detail. The first criteria deals with the central business district, and so we're going to look at daytime population, which is provided through the Census Bureau. Criteria number 2 deals with residential population, so we'll use that number. We're going to use the 2020 census number. I think that it's not an accident that the legislature tied this renegotiation to the once every 10-year census, because that's a real number. We know that projections vary quite a bit, and so to the extent that we can possibly use the real numbers, we're going to do that. Criteria number 3 talks about the existing service delivery responsibilities for each government. I think the best measure there we have is the general fund expenses. We're talking about general fund services, how much money does each government spend to provide those services is very important. Criteria number 4 is what is the effect of the change in lost revenue on your ability to fund your debt. I think this gets to the financial stability of each of the governments, and if lost revenue were to change dramatically, what kind of effect would that have on our funding ability? And so we'll look at short-term and long-term debt of each of the governments. Criteria number 5 is point of sale. We use a combination of, primarily it's the U.S. Census sales data report that comes out once every 5 years. And we tie that together with the Department of Revenue's commodity reports. They both use a dozen industrial keys that we used to call SIC codes. They're now called NAICS codes. But they both split up their data and can be cross-referenced. So we're going to cross-reference that. Intergovernmental agreements are well handled in the service delivery strategy. We do have a tax equity issue that we want to talk about with the county. And criteria number 8, service delivery and funding strategy. We believe that's well covered. The actual wording of that almost matches the definition of what the service delivery strategy is intended to do. So let's break it down into a little more detail. Criteria number 1 talks about the central business district as my shorthand handle for that. What it says in brief, and this is not the entire statement, but the The main point of this criteria number 1 is the service delivery responsibilities to the population served during normal business hours, conventions, trade shows, athletic events, and the inherent value to the community of the central business district and the unincorporated area. And then it goes on further to say that all of the the governments are responsible to maintain the ability of the local governments to provide these services. I think one of the best ways to get to what the actual service responsibility is for the central business district and the unincorporated area is to look at daytime population. And the Census Bureau tells us that this is how you calculate it. There's actually 2 methods, but it comes up with exactly the same result. And I'll show you both. You take residential population plus employment, then you subtract the workers living in the area, and that gives you your daytime population. And you see the percentage distribution in the last column there. 73% for the county, 26% for the city of Jasper, and 0.21 for the other 2 cities. To give you a graphic view of that, this is what employment looks like in Pickens County. You can see that it's concentrated in the city of Jasper. The city of Jasper employs 4,959 workers, and that represents 61.7% of all the workers in Pickens County. So when you do a comparison based on employment, then the shift is towards the city of Jasper with 61.7% of the employees. And we're not going to use that number directly in the calculation, but it is a factor in calculating daytime population. Again, with daytime population, you're taking residential population plus those employees coming into the county to work, and that's in green, 4,682. And those counties leaving, those employees leaving the county to go work elsewhere is 10,679. So you can see there's a reduction in the daytime population of about 6,000 people when you're looking at the county. Well, let's look at the city of Jasper. City of Jasper has an inflow of 4,663 employees coming into work and 1,594 leaving. So they're increasing by about 3,100 their service demand because their daytime population is larger than their residential population. And there's the city of Nelson. This is another example. Residential population, I think that criteria number 2 stresses the importance of considering the daytime population. Residents pay the sales tax and should benefit from the proceeds of that sales tax. Sales tax is ultimately intended to pay for services, and one of the heaviest users of our services is the resident, obviously. Criteria number 3 has to do with the service delivery responsibility of the governments, and we think that the most direct measure of that is to look at the general fund expenses. And so this is the breakdown of general fund expenses. You can see Pickens County provides 83.9% of general funds spent in the county, whereas Jasper spends almost 15%, Nelson 1%, Talking Rock about 0.25% of the total. Number 4 talks about short-term and long-term debt. Again, any shift in the percentage of proceeds from loss, we need to consider whether or not that has an effect on the cities or counties' ability to fund their debt. This is the debt funding for each of the cities, and this comes from the Department of Community Affairs. We're all responsible to annually report this information to the Department of Community Affairs, and that comes in your local government financial reports. That's the source of this data. You can see Pickens County at 70%, Jasper at 29.7%. Point of sale is one of the more challenging numbers to get to, because the revenue department, although they have information on all the businesses in Pickens County and cities that collect sales tax, because of state law, they're not able to divulge that information. But they do provide all the sales tax information based on the NAICS industry codes. And those same codes are used by the U.S. Census Bureau. And once every 5 years, they do an economic survey. And they do provide that information. And they do an outstanding job of collecting that. It takes them about 2.5 years of analysis to put that report together and then provide it to the public. So you'll see that this is a 2017 survey, which is the most recent data. It's only really been out on the street for a couple of years now. But when you compare these two reports together, you can see that the primary engine for generating sales tax is the City of Jasper. There is a strong correlation between industrial and commercial tax digest and the results of this sales tax report. So if as there are blanks or missing information in the U.S. Census report, we can fill that in using commercial and industrial tax digest. There's a 97% correlation between those two data sets for the statisticians in the group. And for Nelson and Talking Rock, they're cities of less than 2,500 population. This census survey doesn't provide data for any city smaller than 2,500. So in that case, we use the industrial and commercial tax digest. And you can see how that distribution fares out. 71% to Jasper, about 29% to Pickens County. Tax equity is the other point that we want to talk with the county about. This law requires us to look at tax equity as an issue, and there's often some debate about the amount of service provided by the county to the unincorporated area, and whether they have funds enough to cover those unincorporated services, or is the city, in fact, funding some unincorporated services. So there's 3 numbers in here that are important to look at. Maybe this has a pointer. One of the first steps that we take is to look at the unincorporated revenue that's available to the county, and it's about, you see total county unincorporated revenue there is $5,959,000. The other number that we need to know is how much property tax does the county collect, and then we need to know how much the City of Jasper pays to the county in property tax, and so that number is 18.15%. Now we put that together in this little simple chart, and I'll explain it. So what we want to know is, of the city taxpayers, City of Jasper taxpayers specifically, how much of their tax money is going to fund unincorporated only services. So what are those services we need to know first? It's animal control, fire protection, planning and zoning, in the sheriff's office. And those total about almost $10,300,000. They have, as I said, almost $6 million of unincorporated revenue to pay for that $10.3 million worth of services. That leaves you a net service cost of $4.3 million. Now, how much of that is paid for with property tax? It's 45% of the county's revenue. So that leaves about $2 million, $1.958 million, as property tax supported to support those four services. And then how much of that property tax that the county uses to support those services is paid for by the cities, and it's 18%. So the end result is $355,572 is our estimate of the amount of city property tax that's used to pay for services provided in the unincorporated area. So we're proposing that there be a 4.98% shift in property in lost tax to adjust for that payment, the property tax payment that City of Jasper residents are making to pay for unincorporated services that they do not receive a benefit from. The other two items, number 6 and 8, are both something that's handled in service delivery. I think it's important to note that these 8 criteria were put in the law in 1994, implemented in 1995, in order to deal with a number of service delivery issues and tax equity issues that were of concern to cities and counties. In the end, I don't think that and I was involved in many discussions at the time, that they thought that it was effective enough. And so in 1999, the legislature implemented this service delivery strategy to really delve into these issues more thoroughly. And so I think that what was to be addressed in items 6 and 8 are probably better addressed in service delivery strategy. So in sum, we've tried to look at the 4 corners of the law. Look at daytime population, criteria 1, criteria 2, residential population, criteria 3, general fund services, 4, short-term, long-term debt, 5, sales tax receipts, and number 7, tax equity. So getting back to the beginning, in sum, we believe a starting point for this discussion would be on the bottom there, 35.09% to the City of Jasper, Nelson 1.12, Talking Rock 0.4, and Pickens County 63.68%. I will hand out in a minute these slides so that you can take a look at them. You'll see this slide, which is the comparison between the sales tax information that's available from the Revenue Department and the how it distributes, how the U.S. Census Bureau says that it's distributed. It's really a matchup of these 12 major NAICS sectors. You can see that the U.S. Census is on the right, and the Georgia Revenue Department codes are on the left, and they can be cross-matched to get you to the sales tax number. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll have copies of this on the table for you to take with you if you'd like. Thank you very much.
And that concludes the city presentation.
Just had a habit of having the camera get right behind me whenever I got to stand up and hear my phone screaming. All right,
right, so I know we've all kind of laid everything out. We've got a ton of material that we're all going to digest over the upcoming week. Our meeting now is scheduled for 10 o'clock next Tuesday, so that we can kind of really go in and do a breakdown and analysis when we all gather next week to go through that. If everybody was comfortable with the same process of selecting an order, I think next week we'll probably be engaging more in one-on-one conversation than it will be presentation mode. So maybe set the room up a little bit to where we're all kind of facing each other. I know it makes it a little bit more difficult from the media's perspective of how to capture that with 4 parties, but if we can just work on maybe kind of laying it out where we'll set it up, but then we'll go through and start to tackle through all the issues unless anybody has any questions, concerns, or any other statements they want to make.
I've got a question. What is the county's proposal for the split?
We'll have that next week, when we get together next week, when we sit down. Anything else? All right. Well, thank y'all very much. We appreciate it. It's been great to get together. Thank you.